Hello, and welcome to the Olfactive Melbourne podcast. I'm your host, Trent Stokes.
And I'm Robin Stokes. We're a husband and wife team passionate about perfume. We're on a journey to better explore and understand the art of perfumery, and we're delighted to have you all along on our olfactive adventure. We're coming to you today from Melbourne, Australia, and we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording. They are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today.
On this podcast, we interview some of the most fascinating perfume brands, the founders, the perfumers, and the creatives who take us through a journey of a scent that best represents their brand. So the show is wrapped around a masterclass in which we invite our guests to explain the facets of the opening, heart, and base notes so that we can better understand how to identify notes and accords within perfumery. Now, the masterclass does unfold in real time, meaning that there is time in between the opening and the heart and the base. This downtime is referred to as the dry down. Now, during the dry down, we are going to take the opportunity to deep dive into the brand. We're going to get an understanding of their mission, their vision, their values, and we're also going to take the opportunity to explore the personal journey of the founder. So, as I mentioned, the show is educational, but is also entertaining. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy, and ensure that you like and subscribe.
Today, we're absolutely thrilled to have with us Corey Newcombe, the founder and perfumer at Criminal Elements Perfumery. Criminal Elements is an Australian brand that's known for its bold, evocative compositions that challenge conventional ways of thinking about fragrance and that push the boundaries of perfume. So welcome to the show, Corey. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Corey, we'd like to start off by getting from you an introduction on Criminal Elements. So if you could tell us a little bit about how did you get started in terms of like where are you based and also what inspired the name Criminal Elements?
All right. So essentially, I've been doing this, running Criminal Elements for about 10 years now. Originally started in the Mallee region in rural Victoria. So about as far away from civilization as you can possibly imagine, while still having some town. About 5 years ago, maybe 6 now, well, actually, probably closer to 7 years ago, I actually moved from the Mallee back to Adelaide, where my family and friends are. I decided the isolation probably wasn't going to work for me any longer. And so I moved to the Big Smoke again and had access to more materials, better services, printers, manufacturers, that sort of thing. So I got started initially because I needed a source of income. And I was kind of sick of working for other people, to be honest. I wanted a creative outlet. I've always been a bit of a tinkerer and an artist as well, and also a scientist, which might kind of surprise you. Normally people think of scientists as being pretty clinical, and that's like part of me, but I also am creative. I like experimenting. I like creating novel and interesting things. And so for me, running a perfumery kind of made sense. I mean, I got to be clinical and precise and do all the formulas and, scratch that part of my brain. But at the same time, coming up with interesting combinations, which pushes my creative part of my brain. So it's sort of a multifaceted business that really ticks all of the boxes. And throughout most of my life, I'd just get bored with the same repetitive jobs over and over again. Like hospitality was great for that sort of thing. You'd start at every day, it would be clean and tidy. People would come in, you'd make a million coffees and serve food. And then at the end of the day, you'd clear it all away and it would be exactly the same as when it started. It was just, there was no legacy. There was nothing left behind. And I felt really dissatisfied with that sort of job. So yeah, I realized that I had to create something of my own to fill that need that I felt like I needed to have. So
fantastic. It's the perfect combination, isn't it? Scientific background, creativity, they combine perfectly to really get into perfumery. So
it helps.
Fantastic. So, Corey, we've got a fragrance that you've decided to bring onto the show today. I'll just hold it up here. Now, this fragrance is called Hansel. Can you tell us why you've chosen to bring this particular fragrance onto the show today?
All right. Well, I might be a little bit biased, but it is the newest fragrance of the range. It's also my personal favorite. I wear it quite frequently, most days these days. It took the longest to create out of every one of my fragrances. I think I had really high expectations for what it should be, and it took me a very long time to meet those expectations. The number of formulas that just went into the bin is just astronomical. And so for me, it was a labor of love, but it's also something that I didn't get sick of during the process, which is really weird because usually you work on something so intently for, several months to probably, in excess of a year or even two for some perfumers. I know they spend years and years perfecting their formulas. I don't have the patience for that. So I tend to focus really intently on it. And then I get sick of them, just like overexposure. But this one has not seemed to do that. And it's great. I love it. So for me, it's my personal favorite. It's new and exciting. And I think it's representative of the work that I'm currently doing, as opposed to the old ones, which are like more experimentation and a bit not quite what I would create these days. But
Great. Yeah, thank you. So, Corey, I think we'll start by applying fragrance. So we're going to apply it to our skin and also to some blotters so that we can experience what does it smell like on our skin versus the blotters. And, it will smell a little bit different on all of us, I'd imagine. So while we do that,
Yep. So let's put it directly onto our skin. Robin's going to apply it to our blotters. Just while we're going through the application process here, Corey, it would be interesting for our listeners to get an understanding as to what the inspiration behind the name Hansel is.
Well, this may not be any surprise to you, but it is directly out of the fairy tales. There's a sister fragrance called Gretel in the range as well. For some reason, which I can't fully understand, I felt like the range needed some sort of whimsical, mysterious kind of theme for some of it. There's also a couple of little Easter eggs in the range. Some fragrances like Reuben and Sylphide, people might not necessarily know the connection there, but Reuben is the protagonist in the ballet La Sylphide, which is what the Sylphide is named after, I suppose. So I like to have a couple of little connections that may not be super obvious. Gretel came out because I was inspired by Slumber House's fragrances back in the day, and I think it was Sova, which was the inspiration for Gretel. It smells nothing like it, of course, but in my mind, what I remembered it was like, oh, it was like gingerbread and like wheat, and it was warm and spicy, and I was like, I really want something like that in the range. So I created Gretel, and that definitely worked for me. It's not super popular, but I really like it. And so then I wanted something else that was a little bit more masculine, and I thought, oh, well, what better than Hansel? So so it's the brother to the sister, and they work hand in hand. They both smell similar in many ways, but different enough that they're completely their own creations. Yeah.
Great. Now, we might circle back to that and dive into it a little bit deeper later in the show. But just before we do, we're going to get stuck into the opening notes because we have applied the fragrance and it is certainly getting fragrant in here.
Yes.
Absolutely. So we're going to lean on you all the way through the show today, Corey, to explain the opening and notes and what we're actually smelling. Just before you do jump in, though, to take us through those opening notes, this is an educational podcast and we are communicating to people who may be a little bit new to perfumery. So it's probably worth us pausing for a moment and discussing what an opening note actually is. So in traditional perfumery, perfume is constructed in a perfume pyramid, where the opening notes sit at the very top of that pyramid. We have our heart notes right there in the middle, and at the very bottom of the pyramid, we have our base notes. Now, our opening notes are traditionally constructed of lighter aroma molecules or chemicals, and they surface to the fragrance quite soon, almost immediately in the fragrance, and they also dissipate the soonest to make way for those heart and those base notes. The opening note provides us with an introduction to the fragrance and sort of gives us a bit of an intro as to what we can expect to unfold in those heart and those base notes. So with all of that explained, Corey, how about you take us through what we're actually smelling here?
All right. So Hansel has a pretty simple structure as far as that it does not contain a lot of notes. I don't like to create fragrances that have millions upon millions of notes, because even someone who is experienced can look at the notes list of a fragrance that has 20 to 25 different notes on it. Zoologist, I'm looking at you. And I can't possibly imagine what that smells like. But the notes list for Hansel is leather, saffron, spices, oud, and ambergris. So there's basically only 5 things that really stand out. Now, don't get me wrong, spices could be a whole bunch of things. And don't worry, there's lots of spices in Hansel as well. But the main ones you're going to pick up on in the opening are cardamom, and a little bit of clove, a little bit of cinnamon. I don't think there's any nutmeg in there, but that's definitely in Gretel. So the spices definitely characterize the opening, and the cardamom gives it a freshness. There's also a little bit of a chemical called ethyl maltol, which smells like spun sugar, like fairy floss. So that little bit of sweetness rounds off the edges of the leather. Now, one thing that your viewers may not necessarily know is not only do the opening notes tell you what the fragrance is all about, but they also disguise some of the less pleasant aspects of some of your base notes and your heart notes. If you were to create a fragrance with no top notes, it would still smell good on skin after a few minutes, but the problem is just the opening would be a bit rough. So yeah, it's often used to disguise and to smooth over the rough edges of the rest of the fragrance.
Absolutely. And this is where I guess the chemistry component of perfumery really comes into play. So now I know you mentioned that oud is a note that is present within this fragrance, and I am picking up a little bit of that in the background here. It's a note that I'm fascinated by, but many of our viewers might not even know what oud is. So can we maybe start with, what is oud?
Oud is fascinating. It is an oil or aroma molecule, a combination thereof, that you would get from the aloes wood tree. It's essentially a tree that grows in the jungle, and when it gets infected with a specific type of fungus, the tree develops an immune response to that infection and starts creating a plethora of really interesting molecules that infuse the wood with aromas that don't exist in the tree when it's growing healthily. It's very expensive, and the variety of smells that you can get from oud is just simply fascinating. It's very seasonal. It's extremely geographical as well. Like, different oud from different places of the world smells completely different. The more you get into it, the deeper the rabbit hole goes.
Absolutely. I have heard with oud that with some varieties of oud, they're actually so rare that per ounce that they can actually rival the value of gold.
They can be more expensive than gold.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's quite incredible. Now, I guess with oud, I have seen this note listed in multiple different fragrances before, and I've seen the term agarwood. Is agarwood and oud a similar thing, or the same
thing? Yeah. They're just different terms for the same thing.
Interchangeable term. Yeah. Fantastic. So I guess with the with oud, some of the ouds that I have smelled, I'll be honest, they are a little bit challenging. They're quite animalic, smelling, sometimes a little bit fecal.
Yes,
I'm not getting that out of this fragrance though. So I guess, how have you approached oud in Hansel?
So, as I mentioned before, there are lots of different aroma profiles for different ouds. So, upon approaching Hansel, I decided not to go for the extremely fecal. A little bit of funk in a fragrance does wonders if it's not the main note. So, one of the other ingredients that I don't use, because all my fragrances are vegan, but civet is absolutely magical in a perfume. It smells like a sheep truck that has just been sitting in a barn for too long. And the same thing with oud. It can be extremely barnyard. I think someone once described to me that oud is like a spectrum. At one end you've got band-aids, and the other end you've got barnyard. And it's, of course, none of that sounds very appealing, but in oud it's extremely rich. It's animalic, which gives a depth. It's kind of like what MSG or umami does to food. It gives it a complexity and a depth that you can't really get from many plants. So it's absolutely fascinating, and it's not super noticeable in Hansel. It's more leathery. So the oud that I use is predominantly leather, a little suggestion of animal, but otherwise it's quite smooth for an oud. So yeah, it's also super expensive, so there's not a huge amount of it in there, and it's strong. You don't need a lot. So.
Well, I love the cardamom and the cloves, and I must say, in this room, I am experiencing those top notes probably more than I have in the past. So, is it heat that might bring them up? Why am I smelling that more?
So, yeah, as Trent mentioned before, there are certain things that are more volatile than others. So your top notes, they evaporate faster. Obviously, evaporation, as anyone knows who's tried to dry laundry on a cold day, understands that that heat facilitates evaporation. It makes it happen faster. So on skin, you'll notice that your top notes will be more obvious straight away, and they'll disappear quicker. But on the tester strip, obviously, the paper is colder unless you've kept it on your knee like I have. And of course, it'll take longer for those notes to appear and also to leave.
Okay, so that would explain why I'm getting a different scent from my skin here than I am getting from the blotter.
Yes.
I think what might be interesting here is I run a little bit hot, and so I think that it's really projecting off my skin. I wouldn't mind actually having a smell on your skin there, Robin, just to see how it might vary.
Also, you have to remember that skin chemistry is part of it as well. We can't predict as perfumers what the fragrance will do on every single person that comes in through the door and wants to, have a wear. But you just kind of aim for the middle, and some people's skin is terrible for fragrance and others is good. So just got to take the good with the bad sometimes.
Yeah. So body heat, skin chemistry, all of these things sort of play a factor in what you're going to smell. Which is, I guess this is why it's really important. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of, tester fragrances in front of us, or I should say samples in front of us. This is why we should actually purchase samples in advance, make sure that we wear them on our skin, go through this process just like we are today, where we're experiencing the opening, the heart, and the base notes to really get an understanding of whether those fragrances work for us. Fantastic. Did you want to drill into any of the other notes?
Well, ask about saffron. You mentioned that. And, I obviously know it from cooking.
Yes.
And the smell, if you put it in with rice. But tell us, what was the facet that you were trying to get out of the saffron?
All right. So for this fragrance, saffron is a bridging molecule. I'm not entirely sure if that's the official name for it, but it's essentially a chemical that smells both like a spice and also like leather. So if you've smelt saffron straight out of the jar, it's quite leathery, but it's also spicy and aromatic, and it's got a couple of little facets there. So what that does is it smooths the transition between the rest of the spices in the composition and the leather in the heart. So you'll smell the spices initially, but if there's nothing in between the spices and the leather, you just get spices and then leather. You don't get a smooth transition. It's kind of blocky, and it smells kind of unbalanced.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, and I've read that saffron is like almost an earthy smell as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, it definitely would be closer to earthy, I think, than other spices. Like clove, for example, for me is sweet and syrupy and almost cool. Like it's got a cold texture for me. So the clove in there helps to make the leather not quite so dry. When you try and breathe in, you just can't because it's too dry. You need something else in there to balance it out. But yeah, saffron is fantastic. It's a great material.
Which I guess leads on to my question to close out the top notes. How do they set up that, the heart notes and the base?
Well, absolutely. Saffron goes a long way towards that. So I think the fact that the saffron has a quite noticeable leather facet sets the expectation that it's going to be leather throughout most of it. So I think what I used to think when I first started was that top notes would be the only thing you would smell in a fragrance. But if you've smelt enough fragrances, you can kind of smell the base underneath. It's not super obvious until the top notes start evaporating, but you can still smell it. And so when you spray Hansel, even though you get spices, you also get leather, then you get the saffron. You won't really smell the ambergris or even maybe the oud unless you're looking for it until a little bit later on.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. So
that answers your question.
Yeah,
it absolutely does.
Yeah.
It does. So we're about, say, about 15, almost 20 minutes through the applications, moving quite fast. And so it's probably a good opportunity here to maybe stop and explain the heart notes before we dive a little bit further into some of the notes there. So let's return to our perfume pyramid. So I mentioned earlier that the perfume pyramid starts with those opening notes at the very top. And then in the middle is the heart. So the heart notes are really where the fragrance starts to mature a little bit. Our more volatile aroma chemicals have started to dissipate, and our heart notes are really coming to the fore. And this is where the fragrance really communicates or starts to communicate what it is all about. There's a good reason why we refer to the heart notes as heart notes, because it really speaks to the beating heart of the fragrance. What is this fragrance all about? So again, with all of that said, Corey, we'll have another smell here and just see how the fragrances sort of evolve from that initial opening through to where we are now. So might have a little bit of a smell. Just grab our blotter here as well. These are wonderful blotters, by the way, just for our YouTube viewers. Each one of the blotters here actually has the image from the fragrance, and it has a full breakdown of all of the notes here. I think it's absolutely wonderful, and we'll pop those up onto the screen so that you can see those in a little bit more detail.
So, Corey, you mentioned earlier that the heart is the leather, and it's a complex leather fragrance. Now, leather, if you can help me, to my own knowledge, is not actually a note, but if you could explain to us, what is leather in a fragrance normally?
So people may or may not necessarily know where the smell of leather comes from when you smell a fragrance. Primarily, it will not come from actual leather products. So in my mind, when I first started, I was like, oh yeah, they get a whole bunch of like offcuts of leather and they put it in a big glass thing and they boil it up and collect that. No, that's not how it works at all. So predominantly the smell of leather comes from the chemicals that they use to process the leather.
Okay.
And so mostly leather notes in perfumery will be a synthetic reconstitution, which is combining individual aroma molecules that smell like leather. In Hansel, I think I've used about 5 or 6 different types of leather aroma molecules, which is quite a lot. The main one being suede oral, which is a lovely, it's a really common leather note. It's soft. It's a little bit sweet for leather. It's not super like petrol. It's not tarry or anything. It's quite soft. And of course that's supported by other things to give it some complexity and nuance, because leather can be very one-dimensional if you don't do it correctly. But otherwise it's just leather in the heart. There's not much else going on there.
I guess leather is a pretty big note though, and I can certainly smell this really coming off my skin here. So our viewers would be well aware of leather. They've encountered leather in their everyday life, and there's lots and lots of different types of leather that we encounter in our everyday life, from our suede shoes. I'm not sure too many people are wearing blue suede shoes, but suede shoes, leather jackets, some of that new car smell that you might get from those leather seats, lots and lots of different types of leather. So how would you describe the leather that's actually used in this fragrance?
All of the above.
Okay.
So you can get leather notes, which are just the one type of leather smell. But what I've done is I've created a leather accord, which is lots of different facets of the leather, and I've just tried to balance them all out so that you get the, I guess, the transparency and complexity that you want from a good fragrance. in my mind, the way that I would illustrate this is kind of trying to space out the particular types of smells. So you, like for leather, they can smell like a new car, and that's great. That's a very spicy, very sharp, very fresh, very chemical leather. An aged leather jacket, for example, will be a lot softer. It'll be warmer. It'll be a bit dusty. So that's very dry. And then the chemical leather will give sort of a complexity and nuance to that. So, and other leathers have kind of animal nuances. I mean, if you're smelling a saddle, for example, that's been on a horse for years and years, it's going to pick up some of that animalic, the hair, the funk, the barnyard, the fecal parts of the animal that it's on. So, yeah, I mean, leather means different things to different people, but I tried to get all of that.
Is that why it took you so many formulations and iterations of the creation?
That is definitely part of it. I think primarily the bulk of the time that it took me to create the fragrance was trying to figure out what would actually work with the leather. So I knew that I wanted a masculine fragrance. I wanted it to be sophisticated, kind of, but I wasn't quite sure what that looked like. So I originally started off with an oud vetiver combination, which is not too far off the final formula, except I replaced the vetiver with the leather instead, and that seemed to work quite well. And the spices tied in with Gretel, which is what I wanted as well. So it took me quite a lot of playing around with different combinations of things until I found something that sort of played nicely.
So, Corey, you just mentioned the word sophisticated, and I'd have to say that's a really good descriptive word for this fragrance. It does smell sophisticated to me. But for our viewers who'd be interested in this fragrance, when would you say would be maybe an appropriate time to maybe wear this fragrance? Is it an office scent, or is it a bit more of a going out scent?
I would put it in evening wear more than sort of day-to-day wear. But then again, to be honest, I've been wearing this pretty much 24/7, and it doesn't seem to feel out of place for me. When I wear it, I can't smell it as much as when other people walk past and they're like, "Oh, what do you smell? What are you wearing?" And I was like, "Oh, you can smell that." It's weird how when you're actually wearing it, you often can't smell it much anymore, and then other people can. And then you're like, "Oh, geez, am I filling up the room with this? Is this inappropriate?" So maybe I think most of my fragrances are probably not quite office safe if you have sensitive noses in the office space. But if you are going to wear any of these, I would probably recommend just a small squirt on one wrist and then the other, and then that way you get wafts of it throughout the day to figure out sort of how strong it is, and you can also smell it yourself better that way. So.
I know, putting fragrances in boxes can often be a little bit limiting. So, when we ask questions about when it might be appropriate, or even the next question for you, which is, sort of seasonality, sort of makes it feel a little bit restricted. But it is good to give a bit of guidance to our viewers as to when you should sort of select that fragrance. So, in terms of seasonality, when would you sort of recommend getting the best out of this fragrance?
If you're in a really hot climate, I'd probably recommend anything outside of summer. So Hassel has the longest wear out of every fragrance in the range as far as what I feel that people should wear, like the seasonality. Most of the other fragrances in all of my range will have sort of a recommendation as to what seasons to wear in. It's on the back of every box, actually. If you have
the box here, I'll just so this is our recommendations here. Fantastic. I'll hold this up to the screen, but we will superimpose this on the screen so that you can see it a little bit better.
So my recommendation is any time of year for Hansel, whereas the rest of the range is limited to 2 or 3 seasons max per year. Just because I've received some feedback that some of the fragrances in the range can be quite cloying because they're very strong. And so in the heat of summer, maybe it's a bit much if you go to town on the sprays. And especially if you're in the office.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you've hinted a couple of times at the potency of your fragrance. I think it's probably a good chance for us to talk about this because these fragrances are quite strong. I think the balance of aromatics inside of your fragrances are a bit stronger than many of the fragrances that we've personally encountered. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of your philosophy and why you choose to, I guess, make such powerful fragrances?
Sure. So there's a couple of different reasons. Primarily, I don't really love how the industry waters things down. I come from a working class background. I know how much it costs to make fragrances, and it's probably wildly lower than people think. Unfortunately, the supply chain and having to pay distributors and people to, the middlemen. There's lots of middlemen in the process, middle people, and they all need payment as well. So unfortunately, you're paying for all of that along the way when you buy a high-end fragrance and you're spending $300 or $400 on it, and it costs maybe $10 to $15 to make. You're like, okay, well, so my working class background was not okay with that. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I should not be, paying this much for a weak formulation in a bottle. Like, you go to the chemist warehouse and you get your eau de toilettes and they're 5% oil, or sometimes not even. So that was definitely part of it. But also, when I started this business, which may surprise people, I didn't really have much of a sense of smell. But it was really bad. Like, I got 50 different essential oils and I could smell 10 of them, and the other 40 were just unknowns at the time. And so I used to blindfold myself in the lab and just open a bottle by touch and sort of try and identify what it was. And ironically, you can actually improve your sense of smell just by working at it, which is something that you can't really do with too many other senses. You can't make your vision better or your hearing better, but you can make your sense of smell better, which is fascinating to me. And it worked. So my sense of smell is really good now. But when I first started, my philosophy was like, well, if I can't smell it, then I can't make it. I can only make a fragrance if I can smell it. So they were all strong. And so I've just kind of carried that trend over because for me, you don't have to spray as much. So you don't, yeah.
Getting real value.
I 100% agree that I feel like my sense of smell has improved since Trent and I have been exploring fragrance. And maybe I was a little bit like you as well, where, particularly my son, who has a very strong sense of smell, would be going, what's that smell? And I could hardly smell anything.
Yeah.
Whereas now I have definitely become around to having better sense of smell. And I guess it might be a good time for me to then ask about the source materials and how you select them. And also whether for you personally, there is a particular ingredient that you think defines your style.
Oh, okay. That second bit's a hard question to answer. But the how I go about choosing my materials is I just buy a little bit of everything. And then I sit down and I smell them all. And if they smell fairly nondescript, like there's a lot of perfume materials out there that you could use that don't really smell like too much, or they're not very obvious, or they're not very strong, or they smell like things that don't exist. So it's kind of like, okay, well, it smells kind of wet and also fruity, but not like any fruit that's out there. And it's also a little bit like aquatic glue. And it's like, okay, I don't really know how I'm going to use that in a formulation. So for me, I like to choose materials that I can identify with that are simple. So it smells woody. It smells like like a bit like salt, or a bit like musk, or things that aren't too complex initially, and then I sort of build what I want from those. I also like to work with unique materials because there's definitely a part of my brain that needs variety, and you can see it in the range. Every single fragrance is completely unique, down to the point where I actually don't use accords to make any of the fragrances. So a lot of perfumers will have their like wood accord and then their amber accord. And then what they'll do is they'll make that in bulk and then use that to create their range from, so that they don't have to go through the nitty gritty of recreating everything along the way. So I just choose what I like, what I can identify, what I know will work in compositions. And then I, tend to end up using quite a few different molecules. It's fun. It's good.
Yeah. So just to round out the heart note of leather, if you could sort of describe for me, how do you see that heart note telling the story, the character and personality of the brand, of the fragrance Hansel?
Well, the artwork for the fragrance might be a bit of a giveaway. So in my mind, I was like, okay, well, if Hansel was Gretel's brother and is coming home to the wood cabin in the afternoon, what would he smell like? And so, he's obviously wearing a leather jacket. Like in my mind, I was just like, oh, it's obvious. So yeah, it tells a story of a sort of I guess, hegemonically masculine man coming home after chopping wood. There's a log cabin, and he takes his like really worn leather jacket off. But then you turn that into like being a little bit more sophisticated. So I wanted something that wasn't quite so dirty and earthy and natural. So I was like, okay, if you took that concept and sort of made it a bit cleaner and a bit more refined, like what would that smell like? So for me, this story is just nice leather jacket. You're going out, you're gonna look good. So fantastic. I'm not really that deep or complex with my romance that underpins what I make.
I love the story. I think you're selling yourself short there. So we've got a bit of time now between the heart note and really getting into that base note. And we'll cover off some details around those base notes shortly. But while we're waiting for the base note to really sort of start to appear, I think that we've got some time to maybe explore the broader criminal elements range. And I'm sure our listeners are pretty keen to get an understanding of the variety of different fragrances that actually sit in the brand. So earlier you did mention that Hansel has a sister product, and that is Gretel. Makes sense, the story of Hansel and Gretel. That might be a good place to start here. But yeah, I guess just before we do jump into Gretel, we do have a very unique way in which you present your samples. And I think it's probably worth, for our listeners at least, to describe what Robin has in her hand here. So do you want to sort of describe how you package up your samples?
So the samples at the moment come in a miniature briefcase, which is fully functioning. The latches work. It opens and closes and locks in place. And in the range, you get 6 little samples of 2 mils. They're not currently in there because they're on the table, but they normally sit nicely in there. Yeah, so it's a bit of fun. For me, function and form was definitely something that I wanted to make sure that my range addressed. Function being that it holds tiny little fragile glass vials without them breaking. You can literally throw that in your bag, drop it on the ground. Nothing's going to happen to it. Everything's nicely protected, and it's strong and it's small. So it sort of ticks all the boxes for efficiency, which is the scientist in me probably. But also it looks kind of cool. It's a nice little briefcase. Everyone likes miniature stuff.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly aligned to the Criminal Elements brand. And the minute I saw it, I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, we've got hundreds. We've got hundreds of samples, and I've got to say, this is the coolest presentation I have ever seen. Corey's 100% right with how this functions. I know you can't see it, but you can certainly jump on our website after the show to actually see how it's presented. But just so that we can capture some of the sound, that is the sound of the latch opening on this briefcase, this hard briefcase that holds the samples. So very, very cool, and it really speaks to Criminal Elements there. So I think it's now time to sort of jump into our fragrances here. So how about we explore Gretel together?
Yeah, sounds good.
Great. All right. Well, let's spray it on. Oh, it's getting quite fragrant in here. I went a little bit bananas.
I can smell that.
Yes, yeah, I was quite excited. All right. Fantastic. All right. Well, how about you take us through what we're actually smelling here?
All right. So much like Hansel, Gretel is also an extrait. So I like how we've started with the strongest from the range. Gretel is quite sweet. I wanted it to be a little bit more feminine. So sweet is naturally kind of goes hand in hand with maybe convention. I suppose a lot of modern women's fragrances are a touch sweeter. It also contains gingerbread spices, which, as the fairy tale would suggest, is probably a theme that runs through the fairy tales themselves. So sweet gingerbread, spices, and incense to stop it from being too cloying was kind of the general structure for Gretel. So it starts off sweet, spicy, and complex. And then the sweetness drops away and you're left with sort of a drier incense, a little bit of tobacco to give it a complexity and fruitiness, but with the incense just to sort of finish, which is nice.
The gingerbread really jumps out there, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no missing gingerbread in this.
Oh, and there's no ginger in it. It's just the other spices that are in gingerbread.
Isn't it intriguing?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right, which should we explore next?
Oh,
We're going to leave it to you, Corey.
Well, the one that's closest to me next in line, Masquerade, that was also released just recently. It's an homage to the way that I used to make a lot of my fragrances. When I first started, it was all about just experimentation. I had no idea what I was doing. Literally trial and error, just like, oh, that smells good, that doesn't. And I'd throw out like 95% of what I made. I'm not even joking. And so with Masquerade, it was a lot more, I guess, I sort of knew what I wanted to do before I started making the fragrance, which is a bit different to how I started. I wanted it to be a little bit off the wall. I wanted it to be completely different and unique and challenging, which is what most of my other fragrances were. So it is a feminine fragrance. It's got a lot of amber notes, but it's also smoky and it's got fruit notes in it as well. So fruit and smoke are often notes that you will never find next to each other, especially not obviously next to each other. You might get suggestions of smoke with a bit of fruit, and that's fine. But these are really bold representations of the notes as well. So it starts off very much like peach iced tea. So you get the black tea notes. Then you get the resins. It's warm, it's rich, and then it rounds off with smoke and a little bit more amber in the base. So it's heavily based on contrast. The fruit is completely different to the base.
To me, that smells like something you'd wear at night. Is that?
Yes, it's also very strong. This is listed as an EDP, but it's more like an extrait, to be honest. But
yeah. So we do love a tea fragrance as well, don't we?
Yes, we do.
All right. So what should we explore next?
All right, so we'll throw back to one of the originals, Reuben. Reuben was my attempt at making a more masculine fragrance for the range. It's a old school sheep, which is essentially a structure that focuses on labdanum and lavender, and it's often paired with citrus as well. So for me, as a counterpart to Sylphite, as I mentioned before, I wanted this to be similar but different. And so the opening has some similar notes to Sylphite. It's also heavily focused on orange blossom. And so you get that real hit of almost narcotic, indolic, rich orange blossom, but it's got more of like a grape facet to it. So it's sweet and floral, but it's also underpinned by lavender, which gives it a freshness at the same time. And then it dries down into more of a peppery, kind of complex, dark, rich, mossy base. So fresh and spicy and aromatic and fruity, and then it dries down as well. I like my fragrances to have a bit of a journey as you wear them.
So we've got Reuben here all dressed up in a suit. Is that sort of what we're communicating here with Reuben?
Yes. So most of my fragrances are designed for either evening or winter wear because they're quite strong. Yeah.
Okay. What should we move on to next?
Well, I feel like now I've mentioned Sylphide a couple of times. You should probably go for that one.
Let's do it.
So Sylphide is also quite challenging. When I created it, I was trying to combine two different ideas in my mind. I wanted to join two polar opposites together, which is orange blossom and vanilla, but I wanted it to be dry, but also floral at the same time. So it was a difficult concept for me to create at the time, and it did take quite a while. Strangely enough, when I first made Sylphide, and I do like to have a little cheeky drink every so often. As I often did back in the day, I'd have a few beers and go into the lab, and I'd make some formulas and see how that goes. And I think I'd run out of my standard sheets of paper that I like to record on at the time, and so I may or may not have written it down on the back of a piece of like a paper bag or something. And then I was like, oh, this is great. This is fantastic. This formula is excellent. And then it probably went in the bin or the shredder. I can't remember which. Either way, I completely lost the formula and I was distraught. I spent the next 3 to 4 months reverse engineering what it is that I had created. And all I had was a little 2 ml sample to go by. But eventually got there, and I recreated it to near perfect fidelity, which is good because that's what I wanted. But yeah, it's very much, it's dry. It's a dry floral, which is weird because most florals are a little bit, I guess, wet, sort of moist. Like when you think of jasmine, it's quite a wet sort of smell. It's not a dry flower.
It's certainly unusual, and like when I'm smelling that, it's quite unique to me.
Yeah, it's also got green olive in there, which is a note that you won't see often in perfumery. The green olive is more like it's a texture more than anything else. So it gives it a richness and a natural facet that you don't often get from too many other green materials.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever smelt green olive in any fragrances before. But that's an absolutely lovely fragrance, by the way. It's beautiful.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to our next fragrance.
All right. Let's go with fall. So as the name would suggest, or imply, this is for evening wear or for autumn. Unfortunately, it also has a double meaning. When I created this fragrance, I was in a really turbulent breakup. I was very upset, and I was trying to find ways to self-soothe that didn't involve me drinking too much. So I went into the lab and I just smashed out something that I wanted to create. It was just unbridled raw expression of how I was feeling at the time. And so for me, it's very nostalgic. It's got a lot of notes of things that I find extremely comforting. Like my favorite soft drink, for example. I know it's kind of weird. It's like that, like vanilla root beer that you get, the A&W. It's the old school, it's like old person soda. Like, but you can't even, well, you can buy it here, but you know. And then spices. Like I very much am a foodie. So for me, it had to be a gourmand. So it's got vanilla, it's got cinnamon. It does have a touch of oak moss in the base, but it's predominantly amber, which is actually made from real amber. A lot of the accords that you'll find in perfumery that say it's an amber accord is a mixture of labdanum and vanilla with perhaps some other resins. But the amber that goes into fall is legitimately amber. They mine it out of the ground and then they destructively distill it, which is they put it in a big chamber and they basically heat it up to several hundred degrees until they get a smoke from it. And it's this smoke that condenses and it's black. So when you're using this material, it's insanely dark, which gives fall most of its color. But it smells like tar. It smells like tar and tree sap. And it's really interesting, really dry material that gives fragrance this intense powderiness that you don't often get from too many other materials. So for me, I was like, I have to use these materials, and I just made it in essentially one sitting, which was not common. Which is
thank you for that story. It's so interesting, and it makes the fragrance even more special, I think, to know that story behind it.
Yeah, I'm really glad you pointed out that the soft drink, the root beer. as soon as I smelt that, I immediately got a sense of a soft drink as well. I think my mind went straight to sort of like a cola, because I couldn't quite pinpoint what that soft drink was, but it was familiar somewhere in the depths of my mind. And as soon as you said that sort of root beer, I went, okay, well, not that I've drunk a lot of it, but yeah, I'm definitely getting a sense of that for sure.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So which one should we move on to next?
All right. So I think perhaps it's time to get out Verge, which I know is a favourite of yours.
Yeah, a bit of a favourite of ours. Absolutely.
All right. So for me, the inspiration for Verge was being stuck in one of the lockdowns in COVID times. So I had a lot of time to kill. I wanted to not be stuck in a house, and so I created this sort of fantasy wonderland garden that I could just kind of bury my nose in and pretend like I was outside. So it is very fresh. It's very green. There's a lot of naturals in it, which is important, because if you want something to smell natural, you often have to use naturals. You can't just recreate, a smell of something like a leafy green using synthetic aroma molecules. Otherwise, it's just going to smell synthetic, and it's not going to smell like a garden anymore. So there's jasmine and rose and tomato leaf, which characterize the opening. There's a lot of citrus in there as well. So the citrus gives it a freshness and a vibrance. So for me, Verge is very much a summer and spring fragrance. It's a bit lighter. It doesn't last quite as long as some of the others on skin. It doesn't have as many of the heavy resins or the oak moss, or there's a little bit of oak moss in there, but predominantly sandalwood. And the listed note of linen is actually a particular type of ambergris molecule. It's not the real stuff, because all my creations are vegan, but there's a particular molecule that they've isolated from ambergris that exists in this, that smells a little bit like laundry when it dries down. So for me, it's like laundry on the line, fantasy garden full of natural things, and tomatoes and roses and jasmine somewhere in the background. And for me, it was just really comforting when you're stuck inside.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about this when I wear it is that it definitely gives you that fresh feeling, and it's quite uplifting, and it is still, to me, quite a long-lasting fresh fragrance. So I love to wear it on really warm days.
Yeah, still lasts a while.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth pointing out here that when we say that a Criminal Elements fragrance is not as long lasting, it's all relative, because these fragrances last for quite a long time. So this is not a fragrance that's only going to last for a couple of hours. We have really given this quite the wear all the way through summer, and we've found that it absolutely lasts all day. It might not last for 16 hours, but it is a long-lasting fragrance. So we absolutely love Verge. As you know, we're a massive fan. All right, what should we move on to after that, Freshie?
All right. I feel like Wicked Mistress might be the one to move on from. Two, I should say. Wicked Mistress is predominantly my envisioning of a situation in which you're in a sneaky hotel room with a mistress, and you go all romantic, and you put rose petals on the bed, and you've got, like Turkish delights on the side table, and champagne, maybe some lychee martinis. So for me, it was kind of like a naughty, kind of sexy getaway, I suppose. And that's what I thought should be the notes. It's got to be feminine, it's got to be sensual, it's got to be a bit soft, but also daring and adventurous at the same time. So it starts off with strawberry and lychee. Those being fruity elements tend to disappear quite quickly. You'll notice in most fragrances the fruit notes disappear generally within a few minutes on skin if you're lucky. And then it just sort of gives way to some rose. It's not like a spicy rose or anything. It's quite a soft rose. So I wanted to really get the soft rose petals as more like a texture rather than it's a rose from the garden kind of thing. It's not a photorealistic rose. And then you've got patchouli. So it's not, once again, it's not actual patchouli, but it's a part of the patchouli that is isolated, so that you don't get the rubbery notes, you don't get the smoky notes. It's just basically the heart of patchouli, and then vanilla to sort of finish. So it's got a lot of other things in there, obviously, but they're the basic notes that you will get from it, and it will last. Well, I had a friend who I sent a sample to, and he's like, Corey, I hate you. I haven't been able to smell anything except for Wicked Mistress for 3 days now. He's only sprayed it on his skin once, and he could smell it 3 days later, 2 days later. It's just ridiculous.
It's got some lasting power.
Yeah. It's also an extract.
I've got to say, it is absolutely delicious. And, just for our listeners who might be a little bit new to perfumery, we've thrown out the word a couple of times, gourmand. When we're talking about a scent being gourmand, that's exactly what we mean. It's a scent that is quite delicious. It's almost something that you would want to eat. It's an association with food, essentially.
Definitely.
All right, so moving on from that delicious fragrance, where should we land next?
All right. Well, we've got tobacco jam, and that will probably be the last one, I believe. Oh, actually, no, my apologies. Let's do tobacco jam last. We'll do Vigor next. Vigor is from the same range as Sylphide and Reuben. It is my attempt at creating a more mainstream fragrance for the range. So I decided to take the basic structure of a fougere, which is something a lot of people will recognize as your sort of classic barbershop men's fragrance from back in the day. And I just put my own spin on it. It's not particularly complex. I wouldn't exactly say that it's my finest or most proud work. But it's just it's a very comforting kind of classic feel fragrance. It's fresh. It uses really high quality lavender. It's an absolute, which is an extraction process where you can get more out of the fragrance than just distillation. So it smells quite rich and quite complex for how simple the structure is.
Lovely.
Yeah, it's for me that is just super wearable. I don't think you really need to think too much about which particular occasion and which season. That is just pick it up, put it on. It works. It's just a really, really nice fragrance.
It's not too challenging. It's for the older gentlemen who don't want anything too crazy.
There we go. So I might be starting to fit into that zone, but I do like my crazy fragrances. So not quite there yet with the old man. All right. So I guess we're going to be rounding it out with tobacco jam.
Yes. So tobacco jam's an oldie but a goodie. It contains a lot of contrasting notes. In addition to the listed notes of tobacco, raspberry, hay, styrax, and suede, it also contains green notes in the opening, which is not listed here because it's a bit hard to sort of wrap your head around. But basically, tobacco is quite a nice fragrance molecule to work with. It smells exactly like a really good pipe tobacco. We're not talking about the smell of a pack of cigarettes or the smoke that comes from the cigarettes. We're talking about the raw material, the actual the leaf that you eventually turn into a cigar or a cigarette before it becomes adulterated with all of the chemicals that they use to manufacture it and add to. So sort of pipe tobacco is quite rich. It's very sweet. It's quite fruity, and it has this sort of multifaceted just bouquet of really interesting things. It's sticky. It's dark. It's a wonderful material to work with, and that was really celebrated in this fragrance. So it's all about the tobacco. The sort of fruity facets are extended by raspberry. So it does have a few berry notes in it, and those berry notes are made a little bit less sickly by the addition of some green notes. So the green notes help make it a bit kind of spicier and fresher than it would otherwise be. Otherwise, it gets a bit too heavy. The hay is, as you probably know, smell of like a bunch of dry grass. The styrax is this wonderful sort of resinous. It's sticky. It almost smells a little bit like toffee if it was a wood product. So it's it's quite nice. And then suede obviously is a bit of leather. So leather jackets, pipe tobacco, and sort of some raspberries on the side, maybe in front of the fireplace where you're having a nice, old-fashioned cocktail or something.
Very classy.
I've got a bit of a scent memory around this as well because my grandfather used to smoke a pipe, and it does have that pipe tobacco type smell. So it's sort of one that sort of takes me back to when my grandfather was around. So it's a really lovely fragrance.
Yeah, a bit nostalgic. Absolutely. Well, it should. It's got lots of tobacco in it.
It certainly does. Yeah, lovely.
Well, thank you so much for taking us through that. All of those beautiful fragrances. And I guess I've noticed a theme of storytelling throughout your range. Do you want to tell us a little bit quickly about how storytelling inspires your creative process?
Well, I feel like it's difficult to connect with an artwork if there isn't some reason for it to exist. When I go to the art gallery, for example, I walk around, and I'm sure I'm not the only person, and I don't claim to be an art buff or anything, but I look at a piece of artwork and I don't really understand it at all. It's like, okay, there's a line there, splash there. It may be modern art. It's a bit harder to understand than the classic art. But when you read the description as to what the artist is trying to convey, it suddenly makes more sense. And I think storytelling is really important for artistic creations of all types, including fragrance. So for me, the artwork does part of the storytelling. There's definitely colors that are portrayed in the art themselves. So Masquerade is just this mash of all these different contrasting elements. And so in the artwork, you've got blues, you've got reds, you've got yellows, you've got a little bit of green. You've got basically all the colors of the spectrum in there. Hansel is orange, brown, and maybe a suggestion of something other than brown, maybe a lighter shade of brown, but it's leather, so leather is brown. So but it's also a photograph, or I should say, a drawing of a man wearing a leather jacket in the woods. So that tells part of the story. On the boxes as well, on the main packaging, there's also a little bit extra as to what the fragrance is about, the inspirations, and sort of what I was thinking of when I was creating it, and who's it for, and what it's all about. But inspiration comes in different ways to different people, and for me, it's very much internal. I often don't get inspired by music or travel or anything like that, or visual art. It's all it's my own sort of like internal world that I create and live in, and that sort of pops out in various ways, and perfume is the expression of that, I suppose.
That's fascinating. So it's time to move on now, I think, to our base notes. Now, I do need to explain this a little bit here. So in the opening of the show, I did mention that the masterclass would unfold in real time, and that there's those down times in between the opening in the heart and the base, and that's the dry down period. Now, we have spoken about the concentration of aromatics in your fragrances, which means that they last longer than maybe a typical fragrance. So that means that the heart fragrance is actually going to linger around for a lot longer than we've actually got on this show in terms of waiting for it to fully dry down and for those base notes to appear. So we took the liberty of actually spraying out the blotters a little while ago so that we would have a chance to actually talk through those base notes. Now, before I get you to go through and actually explain what the base notes are, for people who purchase this fragrance and they apply it to their skin, how long can they actually expect the heart notes to last on their skin?
At least a couple of hours. So right now, if you smell your skin, you will be experiencing still leather. If you're lucky, that you'll get a hint of top notes, but it'll be mostly just the leather. Possibly a little bit of oud as well, because oud is not just one note. When you get a natural material, it often has top notes, heart notes, and base notes of its own. And so when you're using, for example, oud, it's not just going to be a base note. It's not just going to be a heart note, or it's not just going to be a top note. But the leather is not really a base note. It doesn't last super long. But in the concentrations we're working with, Hansel is 40%, which is extreme extrait. It's stronger than most extraits at this point. But then it'll take some time for the leather to disappear or to be absorbed by your skin in part and to evaporate. And so, at least 2, 3, 4 hours before you'll get like a proper rendition of what the base notes are. But you'll be able to smell the base notes in the background. They just won't be super obvious.
How long ago did we spray this out?
About 4.5 hours ago now.
All right, so we should be able to get those base notes coming through. So again, educational podcast. So before we dive into those notes, I'll just return to the perfume pyramid. So we're now at the very bottom of the pyramid. We're talking about the base notes, and this is really the climax of the fragrance. So this is where our notes will tend to linger for the longest. So base notes can hang around for a couple of hours. They can hang around for many, many hours. It really depends on a number of factors, like the concentration of the perfume, as Corey just described. Other factors that we discussed earlier in this podcast, like your skin chemistry, like heat. There's numerous different factors in terms of how base notes can be expressed and how long they actually last. So with all of that said, Corey, how about we dive into those base notes on our strips?
Sure. So the base notes for Hansel, as I mentioned before, the structure is very simple. It's not a confusing fragrance for most people to understand what is going on. It's essentially just ambergris. So most people will never have the opportunity to smell it. It is a product that comes from Wales, and it's been extensively studied over the last couple of hundred years. Chemists have been working to isolate the aromatics from it and recreate them in labs. And they've done a spectacular job. I think ambergris is probably one of the best well-made synthetic reconstitutions of the real product that exists out there. Like osmanthus, for example, very expensive, lovely material. The synthetic reconstitutions smell nothing like the natural product. Okay. But having tried both, you can basically do a really, really good job. So ambergris smells like papery. It's warm. It's got leathery facets. It's rich. It's elegant. It's also dry. It's also an exaltant, so it makes other materials kind of pop out a bit in the composition. So when you put a bit of ambergris in something, it just makes everything smell like it's got an extra dimension. It's no longer flat. It's no longer just one smell. It's like a spectrum of smells that are all coming at you at the same time. And so Hansel is supported by that in the base. It could just be that, but it's not. It also has some super ambers in there. Super ambers smell like shimmering wood, would probably be the closest description that I could think of. It's like they smell woody and dry, but at the same time, they smell like they've got little veins of gold or something that just sort of shine through. It's this really, maybe polished wood, where you get a little bit of the fresh furniture polish popping out of the smell of the wood underneath is kind of what I would describe them as. A little bit like adding vinegar to food. That's kind of what the super ambers do to Hansel. So there's a lot of expensive ambergris materials in there, but I think it's necessary. It supports the leather and makes the whole composition just work.
That's fantastic. Thank you for explaining about ambergris. I do also find it a really fascinating, I guess, substance. So just to tie up the base notes there, how would you describe the story of Hansel in terms of the base notes?
I'm not sure there's much of a story in the base of Hansel, to be honest. When I create a fragrance, contrary to what most beginners might think, you actually have to start with the base notes and work your way up to the top. If you start with the top notes, then you have to wait for the top notes to disappear before you can really smell what's going on underneath properly. And that will take, up to 20 minutes, half an hour, up to an hour sometimes. So you can't really formulate from the top down. You actually have to formulate from the bottom up. So you start with a base, like the base of the pyramid, for example. And For me, that was just about finding something that would not overpower or muddy the fragrance. Ambergris is very clean. It has some facets to it that I wanted to help support the leather, because as I mentioned before, leather can be quite linear. It can be pretty like one-dimensional. And so the leathery facets from the ambergris help transition the heart to the base, so that when you move from leather to ambergris, it's not too disjointed. So much like the saffron transitions the spices to the leather, the ambergris transitions the leather to the base, which is the amber essentially. Yeah, so it's just a smooth transition. It's all about finding that balance, which is difficult to do, and why it took so long, because you got to find that right ratio of everything, and that doesn't work. And so you're like, it smells too barnyard, so I have to remove the oud, but then you don't get into the oud character, so you need to try something else. You remove something else and you put some more in, and it's just a juggling act of which you're working with sort of, up to 50 different materials, which is, a lot to juggle.
It's great imagery there. I mean, we've been referring back to the perfume pyramid all the way through the show. And of course, you would build the pyramid from the base up to the top. Doesn't make sense to really do it any other way, does it? So
you could try. It's not going to work.
It's going to be very challenging. So before we wrap up for today, I think it'd be great for our viewers to know, well, what's really next for Criminal Elements. Is there anything sort of exciting in the pipeline? What's around the corner?
Well, we've got a pretty exciting new Discovery collection coming out. I'm not sure if you're going to be overly disappointed. The briefcase is really cool, but unfortunately, I get the feedback from a lot of people, that they don't know how to open it. And they look at it and they're trying to flip it open. They don't realize the latches go sideways, which is anyway. So we have a new design which is very, very similar. And it's going to be a magnetic enclosure. So it flips open and closed, and it holds there with a magnet. We've got some new custom printed vials as well. So we're going to say goodbye to the little bits of paper that wrap around the individual vials. And we're sort of getting to the point of where the brand is starting to get its own bits and pieces, where everything is truly unique. It's not just purchased from a retailer. All of our bottles and sample vials currently come from the UK. There's a company called Potchpack there. They're fantastic to work with. They're really good for getting into the industry. If anyone out there is interested in making small batch, that'll be the place to go, I would say, for your first port of call. But at some point, it just makes more sense to start making things yourself, or getting things custom made. So that's the point where you get to control the finer nuances of like how big the caps are going to be, like how they look, like what color they are, that sort of thing, like the curvature of the glass that you're working with, all of the granular stuff that you might necessarily want to make your brand truly look different. I know my bottles at the moment are the same as Baruti's. Look at their bottles, I'm like, hey, that looks very familiar. And so it's kind of like, you've got to get your own brand identity at some point. So that's the next stage for the business, which is probably extremely boring, but it's exciting for me. So I think there's a few other fragrances in the pipeline. Having just released Masquerade and Hansel in the last year, that's kind of been the end of the development phase for me recently. I will get back into creating more fragrances later on, but that's it for now. At the moment, I'm just releasing those, seeing how they go in the market, and then mid-year, I'll start to probably work on and start releasing some more. So,
thank you.
Yeah, it's always interesting stuff going on.
Well, good luck with the new packaging. We'll look forward to seeing that.
Thanks.
This would be a great time to tell us, where can customers find your products, your fragrances?
All right. So primarily it's within Australia. Being an Australian niche perfumery, we make everything in small batches. Stock is limited. We don't have a lot of budget for advertising and marketing and distribution. So you can purchase sample sets online through the website. There are also retailers scattered around the world. We've got retailers in Poland, Lithuania, Vietnam, and China as well. Most of those are online retailers as well. We've got a small little shop in Stirling locally that's about a 15-minute drive from where I live that sells our stuff as well. So that's cute. It's a little boutique-y clothing store that has a little display on their front counter, and they do quite well with that. So yeah,
fantastic. So for those who are watching on YouTube, we'll have the website, so Corey's website, on your screen right now. If you are listening on via a podcast, so either on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, we'll embed that link straight into the description. So please go to the description and have a look. Now, on your screen right now, you'll see a QR code. That QR code will take you to our website, which is olfactive.com.au. Simply scan the QR code with your phone. It'll take you through to the Olfactive website, where we'll have all of Corey's details, including the website, all of the social media channels, including Facebook and Instagram, along with a copy of this episode that you can revisit at your own leisure.
Corey, is there anything else you'd like to share before we close?
Oh dear, that's a very open-ended question, isn't it? Nothing springs to mind, but if you have any more questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Fantastic. So I think, Corey, you've just done such a wonderful job of taking us through this masterclass today. Thank you for being so generous with your time. I mean, I've learned so much about, not just about Hansel and about the entire criminal elements range, but I've learned so much more about perfumery in general, being able to understand individual notes, understanding accords, what an accord actually is. And that's really what the point of this show is. It's all about education, helping take people on that journey and sort of make perfumery maybe a little bit less intimidating in terms of, how do we approach it, and getting too stuck on being able to sort of describe things in sort of flowery language. So thank you for helping us bring it back to earth and helping us to sort of identify everything.
Oh, my pleasure. Look, I mean, perfumery can be intimidating for people starting out. But like anything, I mean, you don't need to go to cooking school to become a good chef. You could just need to understand what you're working with. And for me, that was just trial and error. So anyone out there who's interested in becoming a perfumer, I would strongly recommend it. It's a great art form. It's a great hobby. Even if that's all it is. But all you need to do is just get materials, start sniffing them, mix them together, see what they do and how they smell and how long they last. And then you just kind of develop this understanding of what you're working with. And then you just get more complex as time goes on. So it can happen quite organically. Or you can go to, perfumery school in France and spend 4 years of your life in intense workshops. And that also works. Not for me, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Corey. I've also really enjoyed today's session and learning more about your fragrances and your story. And thank you to our listeners as well. Please remember to like and subscribe, and join us next time for another extraordinary fragrance and the story behind it.
Thank you. Goodbye.